Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the SaaS Sessions podcast. Today we have Dan Hurd on the show with us. Currently, Dan is the VP of Customer Success at one of my favorite sales engagement tools, which is called Outreach. I think everybody knows Outreach. Everybody at some point of the time have interacted with Outreach on social media or actually use the platform, but it's one of my personal favorite platforms. And prior to this, Dan has worked with companies like Workboard, Gartner, and more. Hey Dan, such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, Sunil. Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome, awesome. So Dan, again, like I gave a very short, like two-line intro about you. So would love to know more about you, your experience at Outreach, and how's your journey been like into the SaaS world?
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Yeah, so like you said, I'm at Outreach based in Atlanta. I've been with Outreach just shy of 2 years. Prior to Outreach, I worked at a smaller SaaS startup focused on strategy execution called Workboard. Led a sales team there for about a year and a half. And
Mm-hmm.
prior to that, spent a bulk of my career at Gartner and a company that Gartner acquired called CEB. I had similar roles in kind to customer success, called something different called advisory, but it's basically the same thing, both in
Mm-hmm.
terms of kind of individual contributor roles and then moving into leadership as well.
Nice, nice. That's really interesting journey. I think the your experience at Gartner would have been so interesting because I think they sit at the crossroads of all the other like applications, right? And they have so much of interesting insights and interesting research going on in each category. And I think that must have given you a lot of perspective when you also got into Workboard and also got into Outreach. Very interesting. So today I think we're going to be talking about customer success and how do you align your customer success team to the buyer with your customer. How do you make sure that hey, when customers sign up for Outreach, they're signing up for success, right? How do you make sure that when they're successful, obviously it helps your GRR, it helps your NRR and overall retention rates, and you make sure that hey, the customer sticks with you in through more cycles and you are setting them up for success, right? Today we are going to be discussing that. So let's start with, I know we had a previous call and you mentioned something about Outreach following a DBO, which is like a desired business outcome, where you're trying to align your success strategies with the buyer's business outcomes, right? Like why did they purchase Outreach in the first place? So can you tell us more about what does like this DBO entail and like how can companies also build such a structure, whoever is focusing on those higher enterprise deals where they have to really focus on why did the buyer like buy your tool, right? Can you talk more about this strategy and more about this framework that you've built?
Yeah, happy to. So yeah, I think you captured it well in that so we call it DBOs, desired business outcomes, which is
Hmm.
really what are our customers trying to achieve? Why did
Hmm.
they purchase or why did they renew Outreach to begin with? So we're trying to capture what are those desired outcomes and how are we helping them make progress against those outcomes?
Hmm.
Using examples that we might use with our customers could be a sales team might be trying to generate 3x pipeline coverage,
Hmm.
or they may be trying to reduce their sales rep ramp time from, you know, 60 days to 45 days, or improve their
Hmm.
forecast accuracy from X to Y.
Hmm.
So we capture those outcomes and then we are measuring progress against those outcomes over time. And all of the conversations, all of the engagements, all of the thought leadership that my team is providing is relative to those outcomes. So that way
Hmm.
we're really speaking in the customer's language. And we're also helping them to obviously, I think one of the beauties of customer success is if you make your customers successful, they're going to be very happy.
Right.
They're gonna become referenceable customers and then they're going to
Hmm.
renew. So we're really
Right.
focused on 4 points.
Nice, nice. In this case, right, specifically, I think when the handover happens, right, like when the deal happens, when the contract is signed, and now the sales team is passing over the account to the customer success team, right? So, what are some of the things that you have seen where this can be done in a very seamless way, where there are no cracks, there are no gaps, where the information that the sales team is capturing is transferred to the success team flawlessly, where there is no room for uncertainty. And I think when there is uncertainty, you don't know, maybe the sales team is saying one language, maybe the CSM team is saying the another language, and that's where like the misalignment starts. So what successful things that you have seen that you employ at Outreach as well, where you don't leave any room for uncertainty in this case.
Yeah. It's a common challenge, right? Because I think to your point, you will often have folks speaking a bit of a different language, whether they're in kind of sales, professional services, or in success. So I think it's really about that alignment at the point of a kind of a new customer coming in. We'll often try to have, for a larger customer, a CSM might be introduced to the customer even before the contract is signed. I think that can also help speed up a deal cycle, but it's a good way for us to capture exactly what the customer is trying to achieve. But in kind of a typical circumstance, we'll make sure have a handoff meeting between sales, professional services, and customer success that incorporates obviously moving from pre-sales into implementation, and then the broader post-sales relationship where we're doing exactly that. We're trying to ascertain, why did this customer decide to purchase outreach? What are the kind of key goals and metrics that they're driving towards? And then that'll set up the intro conversation and the initial points in our customer journey where we're really focused on how can we ensure that this customer is set up for success, gets value very quickly. We're identifying those success metrics, and that tends to put us off on a more forward-leaning posture moving forward.
Nice. And typically, Dan, like I've seen even when we used outreach, right? Like I've personally admin the tool for a couple of years as well. I've seen, and not only with outreach, I think most of the enterprise grade SaaS companies, right? As they grow and as they keep selling to like higher customers, the products start becoming more and more complex. And when you had your initial set of customers, you are selling to, let's say, mid-market or even SMBs, and the product becomes so complex, even the entry level plan becomes at least 50% more than what their actual requirements are, right? Like I know outreach, like the base plan will give a lot more to a company which has, let's say, 15, 20 like BDR or SDR team or a sales team, and then it becomes very complex. So again, like the core of the product might be like there are like 5 things that you can do, but the actual requirement is only like 2, 3, and that's where the adoption problems start to happen, right? Where there's a lot that can be done, but there is no requirement of that much to be done. And it starts off with a basic requirement, and which kind of results into having an adoption challenges, right? So how do you tackle those adoption challenges where you take your foot into your customer's shoes and then you say, hey, I know there are just these 2, 3 requirements, but then to meet your business goals, there are these 2, 3 core products or core services that we have, which you can use so that you will set up for success. Because obviously, like you have been serving so many customers, so now you know, like there is a playbook, right? There's a playbook that you can say, hey, you can take this playbook and implement it. So which starts with the adoption problem. So how do you like solve these initial adoption challenges, which generally happens when there's a mismatch between what's being sold versus what's being required to run the business or run the objective?
Yep. Yeah. So I would a few things there. So first of all, we tend to have pretty high adoption at Outreach. I think on average, the average adoption rate of sales tools at large, the last kind of data point I saw was around 20%. At Outreach, our average adoption is around 70%. So we tend to do pretty well on that front. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is we don't believe in adoption for adoption's sake. So the previous topic we discussed was on desired business outcomes. So we're really focused on adoption in the pursuit of those outcomes. If we can get you to 90% adoption, but you're not achieving your outcomes, then what was the point? So we're really focused with our customers on, if you're trying to get to 3x pipe coverage, if you're trying to reduce your rep ramp time, we need your support and your help in getting your team, getting your users into the platform, and then you're going to see those results. So whenever we're talking about adoption, we're also talking about the value that they're going to receive through their usage of the platform. And I'll go a step further, that when we're working with executive customers on the executive side or admins, it doesn't matter who it is, if we have a challenge with adoption, so let's say we have a customer that's at 50% adoption, we're able to show some data that says your adoption if we use that pipe coverage example, if right now you're generated X amount of pipeline through outreach with 50% adoption, if we can get you to 60%, you generate Y amount of Y pipe coverage, and so on and so forth. So again, we're tying the adoption directly to the value and frankly the revenue that they'll receive through their usage of outreach.
Nice, nice. So yeah, tying it back to the desired business outcome, right? Like the desired business outcome in this case is like building pipeline. So how can you align your adoption metric itself to the business outcome, which is interesting insight, right? And as you mentioned, like different teams would be using outreach. Like there's the users, there's the admins, there's managers who would use it, right? So how does outreach tailor their engagement for these different personas that you have?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So there are definitely different personas that we serve, and we have different kind of aspects of the platform as well. So for example, Kaya, which is our conversation intelligence tool, that can be that'll be used by the entire sales team, but also you'll have managers that might use that for coaching. So we'll lean into that topic with them. But both our kind of digital kind of scale resources that we would push out to our customers, and also the way that our CSMs and our sales team are engaging with our customers is definitely very persona based. What you're going to talk to a CRO or an SVP of sales about versus what you're going to talk to an AE or an SDR about, or one of their leaders, is going to be very different. So the conversation, the thought leadership we provide, the best practices is really aligned to the persona and what their specific use case is.
Nice, nice. And then to validate that if it's working or not, or if they're really adopting or not, what are some of the example metrics that you can talk about for, let's say, these three different personas, right? Like somebody who's an admin versus somebody who's a manager versus somebody who's like the end user, like an SDR, BDR, or a salesperson who's actually using the tool. So what are some of the like maybe top two or metrics, like which if it goes like orange, if it goes red, then there's like a fire, right? Sonas.
Yeah. So good question. So we have a few different key performance measures for the CS team that are also leading indicators of retention for our customers. One is around capturing the customer's desired business outcomes. The second is, are we capturing the progress that we're making against those desired business outcomes? Because just capturing them doesn't do the trick. It's also, are we helping them make progress against it? There's also, we want to have a certain number of conversations with our customer across the contract year. And we're also measuring the type of conversations that we have. We really expect our CSM teams to be very consultative in nature, so provide a lot of thought leadership. So beyond just what are the buttons to push and the levers to pull in the platform, we want to share with our customers best practices around what are leading sales teams doing to accomplish X and Y. Nice. So we're measuring the types of conversations we're having. We're also measuring, are we engaged with any senior executives at our customers? I think a lot of SaaS businesses think about that. And then, of course, adoption. And with adoption, there are three primary metrics that we look at. One is licensed rate, licensed users over contracted users, active rate, just like it sounds, and then engaged rate. What percentage of our licensed users are directly engaging with the platform? Those metrics provide us a pretty good picture of customer health and what are the different levers we need to pull and things we need to drive with our customers to ensure they're successful.
Nice, nice. And then when you track these metrics, Dan, do you generally associate it to like a grade system of measuring? Hey, it's green, yellow, and red kind of a system, or is there a score based like, hey, if it's like 0 to 5 is low and 5 to 7 is like good, and then above 7 is good, healthy, or what, right? Like what has worked have you tried both of these systems and what has worked more? I'm just trying to understand that sometimes it's also the success person who is working on this account. It's like data versus your gut feeling, right? There's also and you have to have a good balance between the two, right? Obviously data will give you a lot of insights, but maybe there's some communication that has happened between the customer and the success rep who is owning the account, and that those sort of things are very subjective in nature and very qualitative, which is probably stored in some records in the CRM or any like success tool you're using. So how do you find that balance between having a quantitative versus a qualitative assessment of the customer? Do you just lean on towards more quantitative, more qualitative? Do you trust, hey, it's my team, I'll trust my team, whatever they say, it doesn't matter what the dashboard says?
Yep. No, it's a good question. It's a little bit of both, to be honest with you. So
Hmm.
we do have a color-coded
Hmm.
customer health score, red, yellow, green, just like you described. But I think the KPIs that I that I mentioned are really a big focal point for us and give
Hmm.
us a really good sense for customer health and if we have any risk with that customer. My leadership team is fantastic and is very well engaged with our CSMs, who are also fantastic, on each of their accounts, looking at those different KPIs and trying to suss out whether or not there's any risk there. We also
Hmm.
have a motion where we take these accounts and then we'll discuss internally. We call it what's our path to green. If there's any risk with the customer, what are the different things that we need to do? Other parties internally we need to get involved to ensure that this customer gets into a more healthy spot. So we do capture like the health score in that kind of color coded red, yellow, green. But I think even more importantly is the conversation between the leaders, the CSMs, their sales counterparts, and what are the different things that we need to do, the initiatives we need to run to ensure that customers is achieving success.
Nice, nice. And great points there, Dan, I would say. And I think one thing you mentioned just a couple of minutes back about sharing those thought leadership content and those best practices with your customers. The more customers you get, the more users you get, the more you learn, the more playbooks you're able to build, the more patterns you're able to form, which helps you become a thought leader in the category, become like a pioneer in the category that you're selling. And obviously, a result of that is you have, hey, these are like 5 best practices. If you follow this to the T, like you will be setting up yourself for success, right? So what is the impact that you've seen, right, after sharing these best practices? And do you generally share it with everybody, or do you also tailor it to depending on the health score, depending on the adoption, depending on what the usage is or what their DBOs is? Would love to know more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like we discussed at the outset of the conversation, I worked at Gartner for a long time. So I am a big believer in best practices and thought
Hmm.
leadership. And you don't need to reinvent the wheel for every customer. Let's
Right.
learn from what's working elsewhere. So
Hmm.
we absolutely have a set of playbooks of best practices that we share with our customers depending on the situation. I think
Hmm.
adoption in particular is a partnership. We can't drive adoption without a partner on the other side, and our customer can't drive adoption without partnership from us. We've got a number of playbooks and kind of customer case studies and examples that we share with our customers, walk them through on how best to drive adoption higher in pursuit of specific outcomes.
Hmm.
So I think leveraging best practices and thought leadership is really key to our success. And like I said earlier, we endeavor to have a very kind of consultative, business focused set of conversations and relationship with our customers. On the CS side, it's much more than just here are the buttons to push and the levers to pull in the
Hmm.
platform. So being able to share that, and then also, as you mentioned, we've got a pretty large customer base. So it's also helpful to help us scale, because if
Hmm.
there are certain practices that work with one group of customers, they're likely to work with another group of customers. When there's a
Hmm.
bespoke need, we'll take care of that. But that's certainly key to our ability to scale across our entire customer base.
Nice, nice, nice. And that brings me to my next point, right? You mentioned again that large customer base is something that makes outreach like the pioneer in your category. And for that, I think given your like a large number of volume of users or volume of customers, I'm sure like there is a lot that you are learning from your customers as well. So what's your process of having that feedback loop between your customers so that outreach itself becomes better and better, which ties back to building a better best practice or a better thought leadership process internally?
Yeah. Internally, my team does a lot of sharing of best practices that we're learning from our customers. We have different forums for doing that internally. We're also sharing, like I said, different kind of customer case studies. We have a customer reference program. We have a newly formed customer advisory board, all which is
Hmm.
capturing feedback from our customers to surface that back, not just to the go-to-market team, but also to the product organization. So we're big believers in taking advantage of the insight that we can gather from our customer base to help us improve the product and also to help us improve the way that we, serve our customers.
Nice, nice. And I think, yeah, I have one more thing before we move on to the last section, which is the lightning round. How I know like Outreach has a university, like Outreach University, where you offer certifications, where you offer like courses as well. So how has that impacted like overall these adoption and then alignment to the business outcomes and everything? So how does teaching your own customers on how to use the platform creates like a business level impact for you?
Yeah, of course. I think it helps quite a bit. We also, given that a lot of our customers are sales teams or go-to-market teams, and they are all very interested in how outreach does outreach as well. We have a kind of a program
Right.
called Outreach on Outreach, where we share what are some of the ways that both our account executives, our leaders, our CSMs, folks like myself and my leadership team, how do we use the platform? So we have a whole series that we've put out into the market on how does outreach use outreach. And that's really helpful because it also helps us share some of the thought leadership and best practice we use internally. And obviously, I think thus far it's really resonated with the market.
And do you see all the customers like use it regularly, or have you seen there is sort of a push that is required from your side else?
Yeah, we certainly endeavor to be proactive on that front as much as possible, and also for our customers to proactively take those courses, take that certification. There are definitely times where someone doesn't have the information, doesn't have the knowledge yet. So one of the resources that our teams will use are these courses, I guess, using your terms, in a reactive way, in response to some questions, or a way to upskill them on how best to use the platform. But I think ideally we certainly would rather be proactive about it, but having it in our back pocket as another tool or resource for the customers is certainly helpful.
Nice, nice. Yeah, that's what I've heard from majority of companies who have these sort of universities or knowledge bases for customers to help. Awesome. So yeah, let's move on to the lightning round. Dan, like I am going to ask you like three more questions, not related to all the ones that we talked about, but in general. Let me get started with the first one, right? So what's your one tip, Dan, for managing work-life balance?
I think I got to try to prioritize, right? Can't do everything all at once, and you got to try to shut it off when you can. I'm certainly not perfect at it. I'll tell you that. But I do think the number one thing I try to think about in that respect is to prioritize my time accordingly.
Nice. And do you follow any these? I know that there are so many apps and there are so many prioritization frameworks like ICE and RASI and Eisenhower matrix and all of that. So do you follow any of these, or it's just you'll put it on in a to-do list or on a piece of paper and then you'll see, okay, what does like my day look like?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you, my I don't follow a particular framework there, but I do have a very long to-do list that I try to
Hmm.
prioritize. And when at the end of the day, when the kids are home and I'm spending time with the family, I focus on that. And if I have to go back to do some things later on, I certainly will. But I really try to prioritize my time in that way.
Nice, nice. And on to the second one, right? So what's the one thing, Dan, that you wish you would have known when you first started?
I think that the one thing I wish I would have known is it like at the outset of probably my career, I would say, is just the importance of always bringing a solution. So I'm a
Hmm.
big believer in being a problem solver rather than a problem spotter.
Hmm.
And you're not always going to have the right solution. You're not always going to have the right answer, but you always have to at least come up with a proposed solution. That's something that I talk to my team quite a bit about, and something I think I wish I would have figured out at the outset of my career.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I think, and that helps you like broaden your horizon and broaden your perspective as well about things, right? Because when you're trying to solve the problem, you're always thinking outside the box and you're not like limited by the potential. Hey, I have to get it done in XYZ manner, but I have to get it done. That is the most important. Like you have to solve this problem. Interesting. And the last one, there's a lot of books behind you. So I was waiting for this question. Like, I would love to know what's your one book recommendation for the audience?
Good question. One book that this comes from, so I mentioned earlier, I worked at Gartner for a long time. And prior to that, a company called CEB, which Gartner acquired, is a book that was written from some of the leaders at CEB called The Effortless Experience, which kind of relevant to our conversation is all about customer service and how best to serve your customers and what some of the key components there. So I
Nice.
think kind of given this discussion, that's the one I would suggest, The Effortless Experience.
Nice, nice, awesome. I think I'll just add it up. I'll just bookmark it for my to-do list. I would say. Awesome, awesome. Thanks, Dan. Again, thanks for taking time coming on and sharing all these amazing insights from Outreach. And I'm sure, like, people who are listening to this, everybody who is facing challenges with aligning with their customers' business outcomes, I think after listening to this conversation, they would learn like a thing or two that they can go back and fix or add to their process or just change how they're working with their customers. Awesome.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sunil. I appreciate the conversation and good to chat.